Tonight on KQED Newsroom, Governor Gavin Newsom signs into law a controversial $21 billion wildfire insurance fund for the state's largest utilities. Also, we'll discuss the shifting political landscape in the 2020 presidential election and President Trump's on-again, off-again push to get citizenship information as part of the 2020 census. Plus, California is a step closer to allowing student athletes to get paid as the Fair Pay to Play Act moves along in the state assembly. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer. We begin our show with the wildfire update. Today, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a $21 billion wildfire insurance fund that would back the state's largest utilities. Assembly Bill 1054 will allow California utilities to use the funds to cover the costs of wildfire liabilities if the California Public Utilities Commission determined a utility tried to prevent wildfires. But the utilities would first have to invest a combined $5 billion, and PG&E would have to meet additional requirements, including resolving current wildfire claims and exiting bankruptcy by the end of next June. Many of those who oppose the bill say it was rushed into law and that ratepayers are bearing too much cost. Joining me now to discuss this are KQED politics and government reporter Katie Orr. She joins us via Skype in Sacramento. And Loretta Lynch, a former president of the California Public Utilities Commission. That's the state agency that regulates utilities. And Katie, let me begin with you. You were at the signing ceremony this morning. Remind us what this legislation is intended to do.
Well, it's really intended to give customers and financial markets some certainty. We've been having these massive wildfires in California that have been causing billions of dollars worth of damage. That's led, as we know, to companies like PG&E sometimes having to bankrupt. Not good for the markets. It's also left customers unsure about whether or not they'll be made whole if something tragic happens, like they lose their house or their car or some of their belongings. This is all supposed to give them some certainty in that they will be paid back and made whole should they suffer one of these wildfires.
And so this $21 billion fund, how is it going to be funded? Where's the money going to come from?
So half of the money will come from ratepayers, and they won't see a direct increase on their bill. What they're going to do is extend a small monthly fee. Right now it's about $2.50 that ratepayers are already paying. It was supposed to expire. We're going to stretch that out for another 15 years. That will raise half of the $21 billion, and the other half will come from utility companies, their shareholders, and that will be divided up based on percentages, based on how large the company is.
And Loretta, this is being described by some as a balanced approach, balancing the sort of input from the utilities in terms of their funding plus ratepayers. How do you see it? Is it balanced?
Well, the Future Victims Fund, which is what Katie's describing, is somewhat balanced initially. The problem is that fund is the tail that's being used to wag a very big dog of utility and Wall Street giveaways. We could compensate the victims and stabilize the markets just with the Future Victims Fund. We don't need to repeal and roll back long-standing regulatory protections that protect us from rate increases in the future. The problem here is, with the regulatory rollbacks, we could have enormous rate increases in the future, but the legislature will have already given the PUC and the utilities the ability to do that.
And of course, this needed a 2/3 vote in both houses, which it got quite easily.
Yes.
Is what you just described, you think that was part of the deal to get those additional votes that were needed?
Well, sadly, I don't know, because this deal was negotiated in private in the back rooms, and the bill was just published for the very first time 2 weeks ago, and then major amendments.
But isn't that what the law requires? I mean, at least 72 hours of notice. And
well, for this monumental of a program that has, to begin with, $21 billion of costs and has all sorts of side costs and side deals that we still don't know the implications of, generally, the legislature and the governor takes a lot more time and does a lot more public vetting. So my concern is, what was in it that they didn't really want us to find?
Katie, what did the governor say today at the signing ceremony? Did he address this criticism that we just heard from Loretta, but others have been saying too, that this has been rushed?
Yeah, I think it's something that the governor and other supporters of this legislation are feeling a bit defensive about. As Loretta said, this bill hasn't been out for that long. The amended version only came out a week ago. He was about whether or not lawmakers had enough time to really comprehend the amendments and go through them. And he said, hey, 2 books last week. So, this is your job. Go ahead and read these amendments. And he stressed, have been working on this for years, saying that some of it actually started coming together before he was in office under former Governor Jerry Brown. But I think that you're always going to have this criticism, but that certain deals don't have enough time in public. But for this one, especially because of the amount of money and the complexity of it, people are really saying, why did we need to do this so quickly? Have these committee hearings back to back to back. We really should have taken more time.
Loretta, you were president of the CPUC in 2000 to 2002 under Governor Gray Davis at a time when we had an energy crisis, came up out of nowhere seemingly. Do you feel like the lessons learned during that period of time have been learned, in fact, and applied to this current crisis?
Sadly, no. The lesson that we learned back in the energy crisis was to get it right, not get it fast. And the times we moved too fast, we got it wrong. What I do know is this. I doubt that most people who voted on this bill understood all the ins and outs and all the regulatory rollbacks that were part of it, but they trusted the governor and they took the plunge. The people who did understand every single word change and just how much they're going to profit from it are the utility lawyers and the Wall Street financiers.
Toward the end, though, the advocates for ratepayers actually signed on to this package. Was that just sort of accepting reality that this was going to pass, or there wasn't a better alternative that could make it through the legislature?
Well, you'll have to ask them why they caved. But this is what I do know. During energy deregulation, they stood silent. And then at the last PG&E bankruptcy bailout, they opposed it until they supported it. So sadly, I don't think they have a lot of credibility on protecting the ratepayers on these big legislative deals.
And Katie, what did the governor say today, if anything, about keeping an eye on this legislation, this law now, and how it may have to be amended, changed, fixed in the future?
Well, again, the governor tried to really get out ahead of reporters' questions. He said, I know you're going to be asking me about things we have to do in the future. Is this strong enough in this area? He said, yes, yes, yes. They plan to have more bills coming up. He said this is not this sort of be-all, end-all of this situation. It's kind of a step towards addressing some of these catastrophic wildfires and how we deal with them. He said, in the fall, we'll see bills about hardening homes, fire, defensible space, things like that. But again, trying to say that might not be a perfect bill. I heard that nobody thinks this bill is perfect, but it's what we have right now, and we have to do something.
Loretta, the governor today appointed a new head of the CPUC, Maribel Batcher, who was also head of the DMV strike team, which he named just a few months ago. What do you know about her, and what kind of a learning curve is she going to be facing?
Maribel is an experienced government executive. However, to my knowledge, she doesn't have a utility, regulatory, or environmental background. And neither did I when I was appointed by Gray Davis, not in a crisis situation. I was appointed before the energy crisis hit. And my learning curve was like this. It is very intense. And even in a non-crisis situation, I was 24/7 learning the job. I did have one qualification that came in really handy during the energy crisis. I was a criminal defense lawyer, and I knew how the Enrons of the world worked when they were guilty. And so I went after them right away. And so the problem here is the utilities have already been briefed on this bill. They participated in creating it. So did Wall Street and the creditors in the bankruptcy court that are vying for control of PG&E. So they know just how they're going to profit and just how they're going to slip through these rollbacks. So you need somebody who is going to catch them doing it and stop them.
All right, Loretta Lynch, I'm sure we'll be keeping a close eye on this in the coming months and years. Thank you so much for coming in, and thanks to Katie Orr in Sacramento as well.
Thank you.
On Tuesday, Bay Area billionaire and activist Tom Steyer announced he's joining an already crowded field of Democratic candidates for the 2020 presidential nomination. That came a day after East Bay Congressman Eric Swalwell became the first major Democrat to drop out of the race after struggling to get traction in fundraising or voter support. Also, Friday morning, Labor Secretary Alex Acosta abruptly resigned as Democrats called for him to step down over his role in a secret settlement with billionaire child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein a decade ago. And President Trump backs down from putting a citizenship question on the 2020 census, insisting he'll get the information some other way. Joining me now to discuss all of this and more are Politico senior writer Carla Marinucci and senior writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, Joe Garofoli. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here.
Lots to talk about. Let's start, Carla, with Tom Steyer. What do you think he brings to the race that isn't there already?
Tom Steyer has a very big checkbook. He's got a very big mailing list. 8 million people have signed that need to impeach petition, and he's got a lot of experience in political campaigns in California, ballot measures. Yes, he's a rich white guy who's never been elected to anything, but we've seen that playbook before in Donald Trump. So he's looking at this and saying he's a political outsider. He is not somebody who is inside the Washington circles. Whether that's going to fly or not with voters is another question.
And Joe, that's what he told you this week, that he's going to be an outsider. But he's also, we've been to all the Democratic conventions. He's got the speaking slots.
Right.
I mean, he's not a guy that isn't.
He's a political outsider who has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on political campaigns. As you say, he's invited to the top spots. The worst thing he could have done this week was when he said, I'm going to spend $100 million on the race. Now, who is going to give money to a billionaire who said, I'm going to spend $100 million on my money?
Well, is he even going to try to raise money?
Yeah.
Well, he has to. He has to. If he wants to be in the debates, he has to raise, what, 100?
It's one or the
He
other.
has to come up in the polls. He has to at least have a showing in the polls or have these 65,000.
But for the September debates, you have to have both. You have to have 130,000 donors and be 2% in the polls.
What does he bring? He's talking about getting the money, corporate money out of politics. I mean, is that something that even resonates with voters?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think one of the things he has also talked about is how Congress doesn't work. And he's done more than 50 town halls around the country this year alone. And I've seen him in some of those. And he does connect with a certain amount of voters, and he does bring out baby boomers and millennials who like this message. But it is, as Joe said, it's one thing to go from being a cause to being a candidate, and whether he can actually connect and make voters feel like he understands their problems at a granular level. He's a very rich guy.
And we've seen how tough it is to break out in a field as big as this one. So, like, what do you imagine it would take, other than interrupting Joe Biden and, kind of getting the spotlight the way Kamala
I don't know
did?
what his path forward is because of that, and because and he's also going to face a lot more scrutiny of his finances. How did you get to become a billionaire? A lot of those investments were in fossil fuels, and even though he has become an environmentalist and has donated a lot of time and money of energy, but those things will come up, and that's not a good stance, especially when so many Democrats are talking about climate change.
And Carla, as you pointed out, both of you, he's been pushing the need to impeach Donald Trump. That's not a message Nancy Pelosi is fond of. She's trying to tamp that down. Does that bring him into conflict?
I mean, he told us that's one of the reasons he's running. He's frustrated with where that whole drive is going in Washington. He feels the system is broken. He's hearing from voters every day the system is broken. I think that's going to be his message. Whether it's going to push through on that debate stage, if he even gets there, is the question. And he tells us that he is going to continue to fund Democratic causes and the need to impeach issue and the climate change issue. That's a lot of money out there. Tom Steyer has the money. He can do it.
But is he it's a great message, but is he the right messenger? That's the thing. It's like, because of all the reasons we're talking about.
He doesn't really need the money, the corporate money, right? I mean, he
doesn't.
Got his own money.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about Eric Swalwell. He was at best a long shot when he got into this race, and he's basically cutting his losses. I think he raised less than $1 million, and he was in jeopardy of not being on the stage at the end of July. Is there any damage done, or is there any benefit to him for having run?
Well, he gets a little name recognition. But what's interesting is that I've noticed is since he's left, is he's playing nice. He's been the total good soldier.
That's
he
right.
says the Democratic, the way that the debates are chosen, it's not rigged. It's been fair. This is the best way to do it. I just got a fundraising email today
That's
saying,
right.
give money to the Democratic Party. I was like, really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he's saying, and the other thing he's saying that's interesting is that they've asked him who, we asked him the other day at the press conference, the farewell press conference, who are you going to endorse? And he said, I don't know yet a specific person, but one of the criteria is that I want someone who is a, how do you say, a next generation person?
He's only 38.
Yeah.
He has pushed that idea of the next generation leading, so he has plenty of time. He has increased his name recognition, and certainly he is a cable news regular, and I think that is going to continue, and that can only help him in the future.
Exactly. A quick question about Alex Acosta, the Labor Secretary, stepping down. Trump said he supported him. Now he's gone. What's the message here, Carla, about this administration in terms of like yet another absent cabinet
how
secretary?
long is the list now of Trump officials who have been shown the door? And Acosta, like many of the others, insisted until the last minute that he was safe and had the president's backing. That has got to create a lot of sweating going on within the administration. And, look, Trump didn't want this distraction of the Epstein case anymore, or any more questions about it. That was bound to continue had Acosta stayed in the job.
But when he departed today, you notice Trump was right by his side saying, and one of the reasons is, Acosta, Cuban-American from Florida, major swing state, and that's a big part of the Republican vote there. And so that's a key. He did not want to seem disrespectful to him.
The president this week refusing to back off, even though he sort of did back off on the census citizenship question. Joe, what are the politics of all this?
Well, the real world implications are that the damage is already done. He has, by talking about it so much, and I've spent some time this week, or actually a couple of weeks ago, with young American citizens, and their parents are immigrants, and some of them legal, some of them not. There's a lot of fear. It's a lot of chaos. One young person told me it's chaos. We're afraid. I don't know if I'm going to be separated in this country from my parents at the ICE raids begin this weekend. He has freaked out a lot of people and has tamped down the Latino vote.
That's right. He didn't get the census question that he wanted. He tried to portray that as a win anyway, but it was a win-win for him because he has created so much anxiety about the census and questions about the integrity of the census, that now the question is, will people, especially immigrants, answer those questions? California is putting $187 million into the effort to make sure that they do, because California has more at stake here than any other state when it comes to billions of dollars in federal aid and potential House seats. There are huge stakes here.
Well, and adding to the fear, there's going to be ICE raids apparently this weekend in San Francisco and elsewhere across the country. What are the politics of immigration? Because it's not, here in the Bay Area, everyone sort of thinks more or less the same about immigration, sanctuary cities. There's some controversy, but out there in the world, this is much more divisive, even among Democrats, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and we saw some of the divisions about whether crossing the border should be a criminal act or not. We saw some divisions in the first debate on that. In the rest of the country, the Republicans will win if Trump can make this a bigger part of the national conversation. Immigration is not the #1 issue for a lot of people, a lot of Americans. It is certainly one of the top issues for Latinos, but even among Latinos, the top issues are the economy, healthcare. But because it's so divisive among Democrats, that's a win for Republicans.
And do you think it'll tamp down Latino turnout come 2020, or will it motivate Latinos to register and to vote?
This is the question. I think Democrats have to worry a little bit about some of these immigration issues and how they may play out, especially with Trump pushing issues like Democrats want open borders. They're socialists. They want to pay for health care for undocumented immigrants. Some of these issues do not play as well with centrist Democrats, and this is where I think Trump may have another win in this case.
And that's sort of where Joe Biden's support maybe is coming from some of those Democrats that aren't so comfortable with more of those.
Well, yeah, I know. Even though Biden put up his hand when they asked, should undocumented immigrants get health care in this country, as did every other Democrat. That is going to be a tough one for the Democrats to either walk back or negotiate in the general election.
To their base as this goes forward.
All right. Carlo Marinucci, Joe Garofoli, as always, thanks so much for coming in.
Always, thanks.
California student athletes are one step closer to being allowed to earn compensation and sponsorships while in college. The California Assembly Higher Education Committee unanimously passed Senate Bill 206, the Fair Pay to Play Act. If made into law, it'll allow student athletes at California universities to earn compensation for the use of their name, image, and likeness starting in January 2023, unless the NCAA moves to block it. Recently, the NCAA has been criticized for exploiting student athletes after reportedly making over $1 billion in revenue last year. Here now to talk about this is State Senator Nancy Skinner, who co-authored the bill, and San Francisco Chronicle sports columnist Ann Killian. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Senator Skinner, to you first, what wrong is this legislation intended to right?
Well, the issue of athletes being exploited has been around for decades. You remember Harry Edwards' book, The Revolt of the Black Student Athlete, every interview of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, recently the HBO special produced by LeBron James, the student athlete, all about the fact that student athletes are the only category of people for whom entities benefit from their labor in huge monetary amounts, and yet they are denied any access to any of that revenue or that benefit.
And many of these students, not all, but many do come from low-income families. Many of them are students of color. I mean, does that play into the unfairness, the injustice here?
Well, the civil rights issue aspect of it definitely plays into it. And historically, it has been something that black athletes and the black community has really raised as a significant issue. But I think we need to just look at it as an issue for all athletes. You and I, everyone in California, has the right to their name, image, and likeness, and no one else can monetize your, my name, image, or likeness without our permission or without giving us a share of that, except student athletes. Every other student can. Now, why should a student athlete have to write away that right to do something that they love?
And Ann, of course, the schools, the NCAA, they're pushing back very hard on this.
Shocking.
Yeah. What's their argument? Do they have a leg to stand on here?
Well, I think they have a historic leg to stand on. They've been the ones exploiting and manipulating student athletes throughout time, and they don't want to change things. They're making a ton of money. And you know, the NCAA has historically liked to strike fear into the hearts of student athletes everywhere. That's pretty much their game plan of how they operate. They have a lot of heavy hitters, a lot of presidents of universities that are beholden to them. So it is a very complicated issue. California, I mean, I love this bill because once again, California is on the cutting edge of something that is in a conversation nationally, has been for decades. And finally, there's a bill, and a couple other states have them, where to push forward and try and rectify something that it is a wrong. Personally, I get a little nervous. I was just talking to Nancy about it, that when I hear about athletes being paid, I always think about Title IX and gender equity and the fact that people want to pay the quarterback of the football team, and they don't think about the female lacrosse player
or the lineman,
who is actually doing the exact same job and has her schedule interrupted as well. And while they don't produce revenue for the school, they do the same thing. So this, though, is about a person's likeness or image, and I think that's obvious. It's such an obvious thing that you should be able, if someone's using your image, you should be able to share in that revenue.
And who's going to decide? Like, is it just a marketplace if this passes and becomes law?
First, I love that Ann brought up the issue about our female athletes and Title IX, because let's look at some of the changes that the NCAA has made. They have recently allowed for basketball players to have agents, but only male basketball players. We have female basketball players.
And a female professional league.
Yes, but they're not allowed agents. They've also allowed for tennis players, now both men and women, to take home a $10,000 purse if they get such a winning. No other athlete. Why only tennis players? Now, interestingly, when I introduced the bill, who reached out to me? I thought all kinds of student athletes would. Only women athletes. Erin Cafaro, a two-time gold medalist rower for Cal, she described, Nancy, I did not get a scholarship till my senior year, and it was partial. all of those years, I had to basically cover all the costs of all my training, and yet as an Olympic athlete, I had the right to market, to take endorsements, to even sell a t-shirt with my name on it. And yet, under the NCAA rules, I could not.
In terms of like unintended consequences, I mean, could this sort of discourage students who get benefits from being athletes from studying, from graduating?
It could help them graduate because they don't have the same motivation to quit school. There's a young woman, I don't know her name right now, a California young woman, 14 years old. She's the soccer phenom, and she's now taken endorsements because her family has had to bear such costs. And her family were interviewed, her parents, and said, yeah, we're forfeiting college because of this. Now,
I think that
forfeit college?
that horse has left the barn. If you could make money in whatever, programming, computer programming, YouTubing, anything, you might choose to do that instead of get your college education. So that's that kind of protective argument that the NCAA will want to make. But
yet, as
18-year-olds get to make their own choices.
But the computer science student can market an app while they're still a student,
Absolutely.
and the music student can record while they're still a student.
What kind of trouble can the NCAA or any other group cause if this becomes law?
They can ban California schools from participating in NCAA championships.
Legally, that's their threat.
That's what they're saying.
That's their threat, but it's a violation of antitrust law, and so far, the various court challenges, the times they've tried to do things where they've been brought to court around an antitrust issue, they have lost.
To what extent has this become a bipartisan issue? Our Republicans are supporting this.
Huge.
It passed unanimously out of that committee.
Yes, and I have Republican co-authors, and the support is completely bipartisan. And there's a bill in Congress right now, and it's a bipartisan bill introduced by a Republican congressional member and a Democrat.
If this happens here, if the governor signs it, and just quickly, has he indicated he'll sign it? Governor Newsom?
We have not sat down and talked yet.
Yeah. Is this going to sort of be the dam opening up here in other states, if not the federal government doing something like this?
I think it could be. We had a story in the Chronicle that was funny about athletes being recruited. If you're being recruited by UCLA and Arkansas, if you thought you could make money at UCLA, why wouldn't you go there? I mean, I think from a competitive standpoint, yes, other states would. And I also think that just there would be pressure from the student athletes themselves across the board that this is the way it should be.
All right, and just really quickly, do you see this as fitting in with what we're seeing with the pay equity call for the national women's soccer team?
Absolutely. We concentrate a lot on elite athletes, but let's just talk about every single athlete, no matter what their sport is. So the women, they would be able to promote themselves. Promoting themselves promotes women athletics, which maybe brings an audience.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Nancy Skinner and Killian. Thank you very much. And that'll do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer. Thanks for joining us.